Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're talking about something you're going to deal with for your entire working life, teamwork. But we're not just talking about any team. We're looking at how 27 totally different countries actually manage to work together like one giant, super complex workplace team. If you're training for a future career right now, whether that's in tech, business, agriculture, construction, whatever, knowing how huge groups make decisions, that's a total superpower. So let's dive right in and see how the European Union handles the ultimate group project. So think about your class projects. Or actually, think about a time you tried to organize a holiday with a huge group of friends. Have you ever tried getting a giant group like that to agree on just one single plan? It's complete chaos, right? Everyone has completely different ideas, totally different priorities, and nobody wants to be left out or ignored. Now, imagine instead of your friends or classmates, you're dealing with entire countries. Well, the European Union faces this exact problem every single day. They have to balance the interests of 27 unique, independent member states. 27. And they all have different economies, different histories, and completely different needs. Some are up north, some are down south. One country might want to spend money supporting farmers, while another is totally focused on investing in artificial intelligence. Getting all 27 to just agree on something is a massive challenge, but it's also the absolutely crucial, most important job in Europe. To make this whole thing work, the EU relies heavily on something called consensus. So, what's consensus? Basically, it's finding a solution that everyone in the group can accept, even if it isn't their perfect first choice. Honestly, this is probably the single most important workplace skill you can learn. The EU is always trying to find an agreement where no single independent country is forced to do something they absolutely hate. Why? Well, because if you force a teammate to do something they hate today, they are definitely not going to help you out tomorrow. It's all about finding that balance. And this perfectly clears up a really common misunderstanding. You'll often hear people on the news complaining, right? They'll say, Brussels is making us do this, or Brussels passed a terrible rule. But Brussels is literally just a city. When people say that, they're forgetting one incredibly important fact. Their own national government is sitting right there at the table making those exact decisions. The institution making this happen is called the Council. So through the Council, your own leaders are directly involved in every single big choice. To really wrap our heads around how this massive team operates, it helps to just think of a normal workplace. Picture the Council in two parts. On one side, you have the general managers, that's the European Council. And on the other side, you have the specialists, that's the Council of Ministers. Just like in a real company, the general managers set the big overarching goals, and the specialists, they write the actual rules to make those goals happen. Let's break this down a bit more. First up, the general managers, the European Council. Okay, so these are the top bosses. The European Council is made up of the 27 heads of state or government. Depending on the country, that means their president or their prime minister. They meet up in these big meetings called summits, at least 4 times a year, usually behind closed doors in Brussels. Now, they aren't the ones writing the tiny, boring details of the laws. Instead, they decide the main, big-picture goals for the future. Like, they might all agree, hey, we need new security rules for Europe. They basically just point the whole team in the right direction. But wait, how do you keep 27 bosses from just talking over each other the whole time? Well, to keep the meetings on track, they elect a president for a 2.5-year term. Now, this person is not the king of Europe, okay? Their main job is actually to be a mediator. They're a peacemaker who negotiates, talks to everyone before the meeting, and tries to help these 27 bosses find common ground. If you ever find yourself leading a team at your future job, really remember this. A great leader usually spends way more time listening and mediating than just shouting out orders. Next up, we have the specialists, the Council of Ministers. So the really cool thing here is that this group actually changes depending on what problem needs to be solved. Say the EU needs to write rules about banking. Well, the 27 finance ministers meet up to form what's called ECOFIN. But if they need to pass laws for farmers, the 27 agriculture ministers meet. If it's about trade agreements, it's the General Affairs Council. See how that works? These are the actual specialists writing the real laws that will directly impact your future jobs, whether you end up in an office, on a farm, or in a factory. They make the practical rules. Let's move on to shared leadership. Who is the team leader? With all these different meetings happening every single week, you might be wondering how the team actually functions at all. Well, instead of one person just being the boss forever, they share the leadership. They use a rotating presidency. Basically, every 6 months, a different country gets to lead the meetings and set the daily agenda. So, for example, Poland takes the lead in early 2025, and when their 6 months are up, the next country simply takes over. It's a great way to make sure everybody gets a turn to guide the team. Now, I know what you might be thinking right now. A European Council president, 27 top bosses, rotating leadership every 6 months. Honestly, it sounds a little bit confusing, right? Well, don't worry. Even famous experts get confused by this. Back in the 1970s, an American diplomat named Henry Kissinger famously joked, "Who do I call if I want to call Europe?" Because there are so many leaders sharing the power, it can sometimes be a bit tricky to know who the single person in charge actually is. But, this confusing system exists for a really good reason. It balances the power. By sharing the leadership, it mixes up the northern, southern, eastern, and western states, and most importantly, it prevents any permanent majority from just bossing everyone else around. It means big countries like France or Germany can't just force their will onto the smaller countries. Everyone gets a voice. Just like in a good workplace, you definitely don't want the loudest people to always get their way. You need a system that protects everyone's input. So the EU Council is basically a massive, real-world example of three super important words: negotiation, compromise, and problem solving. Getting things done in the real world is almost never about forcing your perfect idea onto everyone else. It's really about communicating, balancing different interests, and finding practical solutions together. The Council proves that even 27 totally different countries can work as one team if they use these exact skills. And that brings us to our final thought for today. The skills the EU uses to run an entire continent are the exact same skills you are going to need to succeed. Whether you're leading a team project at school or trying to solve a tough problem with your future coworkers, you will need to find consensus. So, how will you use negotiation and compromise to bring people together in your future workplace? Keep that question in mind as you step into your career.